Thank you so much for joining us here today. You are at the event From Women to Women, Practices of Indigenous Communality Construction and, oh my goodness, sorry, Communality Construction in Mexico, Sápmi, and Finland. This is a co-sponsored event from University of Helsinki, Indigenous Studies, the Global Extractivisms and Alternatives Initiative, EXALT, the Armadillo Collective, and it is funded by the Finnish University Partnership for International Development, UNIPID. So while we're here today in this lovely Zoom space, which we are so glad that so many of you were able to join us here, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions for the event, we want to encourage you to please submit questions at any time via the chat, also comments. The chat is an open space that we welcome you to use robustly during the presentations. And then after the presentations, we're going to go through all our presentations first. And at the end, we will have a Q&A. And during the Q&A, you are welcome to either ask a question via chat or use the raise hand function, and the facilitator will call on you to ask your question with your voice. And we ask that during the entire event, please keep your microphones muted when not speaking. This forum will be recorded, and registered participants will receive a link via email after the event. If you did not register for this event, if you came, for example, from the internal Global Development Studies link or the Indigenous Studies link, please send a private message to me, Sophia Hagolani-Albov, via chat during the event, and I'll make sure that you also get added to the list where you'll get the link of the recording. If you have any problems with your camera or microphone, there's the link for the Zoom settings right there. And if you encounter any other challenges during the event, please feel welcome to ask for help in the chat. We are here for you. Our agenda today, we are going to have a little welcome from Perio Virtanen from Indigenous Studies. Then we will get a greeting from La Delegación Zapatista Extemporánea. Then we will have our presentations from our speakers. And then after we have all 4 presentations, we will have a Q&A dialogue with the delegation and the audience, and then we will close this event. So we are once again just so excited to be here together today. And yes, I will now turn the floor over to Perio for a
Kiitos, Sophia. Thanks so much, Sophia, for these words. And puras pohtiin pohkaide, welcome everyone. Buenos días, nuestros visitantes de México. Bienvenido al nuestro evento de hoy. Es un grande placer de estar aquí con ustedes. Muchas gracias por su participación. So today we are here, as you know, for really tackling and addressing the issue of self-determination and self-government and what means autonomy for Indigenous peoples. So it's really great that, again, Indigenous Studies is doing this together with Indigenous participants, and we are always looking for co-creation of knowledge and co-learning from different perspectives, other ways of knowing, and especially from Indigenous ways of knowing, and really drawing on Indigenous knowledge production methods and Indigenous research methodologies. So it's really a great pleasure to be here in this event today, and thank you for everyone who made it to this Zoom event this afternoon. So on the behalf of Indigenous Studies, welcome everyone, and I hope we will have a great event today for next 2 hours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Perio. We really appreciate those contextualizing words of welcome. I would like to now turn the floor over to La Delegación. They will be addressing us in Spanish, and then we are very lucky to have Erwin with La Delegación, and he will be translating their greeting to, or their welcoming words and some of the contextualization of why they're here in Finland into English for us. So I would like to now turn the floor over to the delegation.
Buenas tardes, nosotros somos una delegación del EZLN con nuestras diferentes lenguas y culturas.
Good morning, good afternoon all. We are a delegation from
I'm so sorry, Erwin, you are muted. Could you please unmute? Thank you so much. We we lost you at the translation.
Good afternoon. We are one delegation from the Zapatista National Army Liberation, and we are happy here to express our different cultures that is conform.
Somos escucha y palabra. La travesía por la vida es recorrer los 5 continentes.
We are listening and work. Our journey is through the different continents all over the world.
Para compartir nuestras historias de lucha y compartir experiencias con los pueblos originarios de cómo es su resistencia.
We are here to share with all of you how has been our struggle and our resistance with all the indigenous different people, and how we have been keeping this resistance through the years.
Nosotros pues somos 28 grupos que estamos en el continente europeo para escuchar sus formas de organización y resistencia, y compartir también experiencias y cómo venimos haciendo los trabajos.
We are 28 delegations in Europe at the moment. Each delegation is conformed for 5 to 4 members, and we are here to exchange with the different collectives, organizations, individuals, their different struggles, the forms of resistance, and how they are conformed and how they have been resisting during many years.
La travesía por la vida es porque también se pensó esto porque a veces que hay compañeros o muchas personas que quisieran ir a conocernos en los caracoles.
The Journey for Life was thought to visiting all the people who were not able to be received in the different caracoles in Chiapas, Mexico.
Y por eso se pensaba que nosotros teníamos que venir a compartirles nuestra forma de organizarnos y de luchar, porque sabemos lo difícil que es para llegar hasta allá. Entonces se vio que tan siquiera una persona que viniera a hablar o a escucharles cómo es su proyecto y su forma de organizarse.
So we travel here to share our struggles, our ways of organizing, and how our autonomy has been built to all these individuals and people who has not been able to visit us in our caracoles. So by this, we'd like to exchange of different experiences, different views, worldviews. So by this, at least one of us can reach all different collectives in Europe. So to start and sharing these beautiful experiences with all of you.
Y eso es lo que es la travesía por la vida. Y voy a darle paso a otra de mis compañeras.
So this is mainly the journey for life, and I would like to share the voice with another compañera, another comrade.
Pues es eso, lo que es la travesía por la vida, lo que se inició, pues es para escuchar, compartir y experimentar y conocer.
So the journey for life has as the main aim, to exchange, to listen and the word with different collectives from all over Europe and the indigenous people. So basically, we are traveling and meeting different forms of organization and learning and exchanging these processes with them. So this will be their participation at this point. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for giving us some information about why you are here and what you are doing. And as mentioned before, we are just so honored to be able to have this event together. And without further ado, we can move into the actual presentations. The next speaker is going to be Helga West. Yes, I would like to now turn the floor over to Helga.
Thank you, Sophia. Will you share my PowerPoint? Yes, thank you so much. Do you hear me well? I hope you do. You hear me well?
We hear you very well, loud and clear.
Thank you. If I'm being interrupted, it's my son who is who is running in the same room. But I just want to say that it makes me so happy to see all of you here, and especially to see the delegation, because I will actually continue reflecting the journey for life that we were able to experience with them, with the delegation who is here present. So, Journey for Life in Sápmi. Okay, so this is the name that we are referring for the historical gathering of the Sámi people and the Zapatista delegation in the end of this September in Otsajohka and Anar, Inari and Utsoki area, just a week ago, basically. I will speak very slowly and hopefully calmly so that Irving can translate what I'm saying to the delegation. But I will just reflect the Journey for Life in Sápmi. And even though I'm speaking here today, I wish to reflect the whole Sámi coordination group, because we were doing this together, and there was no individual was more important than we as a collective. So I just want to highlight this because it's very important dimension of the process. To give a context, we were invited to this process in the beginning of this year by Armadillo Collective Finland. And in the beginning, the group was very small, but during the past months, we expanded our Sámi coordination group so that eventually we were like from 10 to 15 people who were organizing this meeting between the Zapatista and the Sámi. And in this slide, you see a quotation, and it's from our letter that we sent to the Zapatistas in the end of August. The letter is called 500 Years From Now On, and I will read the very first sentences of that letter. We, the indigenous Sámi people, identify ourselves as the children of the sun. Our territory has been divided by 4 states now known as Finland, Norway, Sweden, and Russia in Northern Europe. We call our territory as Sápmi. Sámi land crosses borders, but we find the borders artificial. This letter, the aim of this letter was to reaffirm our invitation to the Zapatistas to visit Sápmi. And already in the beginning, in the process, when we started organizing ourselves for this process, we had this wish that there would be only one visit to Sápmi, and not so that there would be separate visits in each country on Sámi core area, because that was the initial plan, to first visit the Sámi core area of Norway, the Sámi core area of Finland, the Sámi core area of Sweden. But we wanted that there would be only one Sápmi visit where the Sámi could gather to meet the Zapatistas. And for COVID restrictions, that happened exactly as we hoped. We didn't hope the global pandemic, but eventually it turned out so that we had one visit in Sápmi, and our Norwegian Sámi joined the Finnish part of the coordination group. So Otsajohka, known as Utsjoki, was selected to be the place. And that was the location where we spent 3 full days all together with the delegation. Yeah, so you can change the slide. And this was the moment, the actual moment when we received the guests. We had been waiting for several months. It was a very beautiful moment at the airport of Helsinki-Vantaa to actually greet the delegation. We had been dreaming of meeting, and to actually see the delegation arriving safely. It was a very beautiful day. And that was also the day when we took off to up north on the same day. Yeah, this photo is from September 22nd, and there were people from collectives who had been organizing the Finnish part of the Journey for Life. Yeah, you can change the slide. And the next photos are already taken from Otsajohka, or in Njorkam, where we were, and we were very happy to spend exactly those days on that region, because they were the last days to see the last autumn colors of Sápmi region. And here we are, like, getting to know the Tietno River territory, and explaining the landscapes and also bioheritage of Tietno River region. And most of our Sámi coordination group are from Tietno River areas, so it was like our home territory for many of us. But of course, the exact location shaped a lot our Sápmi visit, because we wanted to share short stories and yoiks, and also the current threats of that region, of that particular region. Yeah, you can change the slide. And I would say that this bioheritage of Tietno River was one of the biggest discussions we had in our discussions, because for the Sámi, the years have been very, how would I say, sad because of the threats concerning the Atlantic salmon. So many of us were saying that people in our region are feeling very desperate because our Atlantic salmon is not doing well due to many factors. And then we were sharing these like situation and also the mentality concerning these surrounding changes and how they affect our people and our cultures. So it was much about the region of the Etno River. Here in these photos, we are in Nuorgam area and also in Puolemahjauri in Pulmanki Järvi in Finnish. Yeah, you can change the slide. Just a few words about how we organized how we were like organizing ourselves in this process from the Sámi perspective. We wanted to implement indigenous methods as far as we could. And this meant, for example, that all decisions that we took, we made them collectively, listening to everybody. Of course, that doesn't mean that this is just like an indigenous method, but for us it was very important that we wanted to avoid these kinds of like Western patterns for organizing a meeting and such. We wanted to avoid certain kinds of patterns. So we wanted to give as much free space for discussions during the process and during the actual visit. And we thought that this is the most important thing that we can offer for our guests, like our time and our space. And we did those discussions in Labbu, in the hut that you can see in this photo. But also we wanted to respect our guests' wishes concerning the journey for life. So that meant that we wanted to avoid big events and this kind of like a media attention, because we wanted to protect the intimacy between this very symbolically important gathering. And here in this photo, we are we're putting up the hut, and also getting to know the not the protocol, but the ways how to be in the hut. Yeah, you can change the slide. So the discussions, they played a big role in the during these days, and the discussions were discussions happened always in a circle, because we wanted to see each other directly, and also when we were in a circle, that was a good way to protect the space. So we really wanted to, or we tried our best to create a warm and safe space for discussions. But of course, we only had a few days, and we were saying that that one should be like 1 year in Sápmi land, in Sámi land, to actually to get to know the land and the seasons and traditions of those seasons. So we were all very sad that the visit was so short. So we hope that there would be a continuation, some kind of follow-up of this start that we all started together. And here in the photo, you can see our Sámi flag. Yeah, you can change the slide. Before I finish this this part, I just want to say that, or like maybe ask a question like, what is solidarity? Because we saw this process very much as a grassroots solidarity process, not some kind of a cultural project, not like a project, but a process, a grassroots process. And we have been thinking a lot, like, what is this solidarity in reality? What does it mean? Here you see us like showing this kind of symbolic solidarity for our indigenous sisters and brothers to resist aggressions and harassments towards Zapatista autonomies in Mexico. This is very, very important, of course, to show these kinds of messages to the world. But what does solidarity mean, like beyond? What does it mean? And these are the questions we are thinking now, because we got many seeds from this meeting, and we are thinking what to do with the seeds that were planted. And also I would like to say that because the Sápmi are the only recognized indigenous people in Europe, this means that there is much interest around the Sápmi people. And many would like to visit Sápmi, Sámiland. Many would like to collaborate with us. But I have a feeling that many of us, at least in the Sápmi coordination group, are prioritizing our indigenous friends. So for us, this was really, we are very lucky to have the delegation to visit in Sápmi. Yeah, and then the last slide of my presentation, you can change the slide. Yeah, so these are some of the questions we have been discussing in our Sápmi coordination group after the meeting, because we saw this as a solidarity process, and we wanted to make space for communality, and we tried to build communality. It meant that one way or another we had to break individualism in ourselves to make space for communality. And also we were discussing that how can we speak as a collective. This was something that we learned from the Zapatista delegation. So it was really important teaching for us. And also, like, if we collaborate with institutions, what kind of support could be sought from institutions? We were collaborating with Greenpeace Finland, and Greenpeace Finland has been an important ally for the Sápmi people in Finland. But if we were to build a solidarity process from the scratch, maybe there would be a way to like, how would it be if we wouldn't be collaborating with institutions? How would the process then be, for example? And of course, the big question is, like, what should we do now with the new knowledge that we gained from the Zapatista delegation, and how could we develop that knowledge so that it would be useful and it wouldn't just stay among us? Yes, so thank you.
Wonderful, Helga. Thank you so very much. And I hope that this little video will work. I take it that this is probably the lovely fire that you had burning in that beautiful safe space that you made. So thank you so much for that presentation. And like I said, we're going to keep all questions till the end of the presentations, but we do invite people to please use the chat if you want to note down a question that you have now for Helga. Thank you so much for sharing about that experience. I would like to now turn the floor over to Irja Surujärvikari.
Are you seeing this, Sophia?
Yes, we are. It looks wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. I wish heartily welcome the Zapatista delegation to Finland to learn about the Sápmi and how the Sápmi people are struggling to make their life better. And I was asked mostly to talk about my experiences during my long political career. And that's why I will tell most about the history of Sápmi nation building, and at the end I will reflect my experiences. But oh no, it's not going. Yes, I'm Irja Surujärvikari, and I'm nowadays retired from my university lectureship, but I'm still going as a Sápmi researcher in Indigenous studies at this university. And I first would like to tell about you the new or traditional Sápmi method. It's called Sápmi, Sápmi way of remembering. And I and my co-writers of one article, Jelena Porsanger and Ragnhild Lydia Nystad, we have presented shared remembering method when published our article called The Shared Remembering as a Relational Method in Conceptualizing Sápmi Women's Leadership. So we have developed a method, muistasit ohtas, shared remembering, for gathering information and conceptualizing Sápmi women's leadership within the Sápmi theories of knowledge and value system. Muistasápmi, as you can read here on the slide, is a means of communication, transmission of knowledge for the Sápmi, and it can be compared to joikluohti, which is Sápmi music, which is a representation that brings memories, happenings, characters, and other issues alive. And it's often related to the happening to kin, family ties, local history, and Sápmi history in general. Remembering, or we can call it also narration, is a traditional indigenous methodology globally applied to reflect experiences and strengthen community ties and togetherness. By Muistasápmi, the Sápmi made their reality comprehensible to themselves and to others in a culturally appropriate way. And in the next slide, you can see a nice picture of a solju, which is a symbol of Sápmi femininity and relationality. And this picture is also from the same article on Sápmi women's leadership. And the purpose of this picture or figure is to visualize the conceptualization of Sami women's leadership according to 3 Sami women's experiences, as I mentioned. You can see here a form of solyu connecting Sami concepts, values, and actions put into 2 circles, displaying a holistic integrity. Solyu is especially a symbol of relationality. A solyu is a Sami silver breast pin and is part of Sami women's dress, gakti. I hope you have seen the soljus in Sápmi when visiting there. It is a decorative jewelry which fastens the silk shawl and the dress in an aesthetic unity. Solju has a deep symbolic meaning in Sami life. It's connected to Sami material and immaterial culture, aesthetics, beliefs, spirituality, and collectivity. Solju is related especially to femininity in a traditional Sami way, but nowadays it also is related to gender equality because solju can be used in traditional Sami dress by both women and men. I can return to these Sami concepts of the solju at the end of this presentation if I have got time to do that. And now you can see there I have made a list of some important political events since the 70s when the Sami revitalization started and when collective ethnic identity was constructed with the help of symbolic, linguistic, and knowledge-related themes. And also the important Sami programs were published by the Sami in this in the 70s and 80s. And I have been making or I have been participating in these events even that time. So 2 important declarations can be mentioned: the Sami Cultural Policy Program and the Sami Political Program. And then we can mention during the Alta dispute, 1979 until 81 in Norway, the Sami issues became human rights and they started the discussion of self-determination. And then one important event to mention is this Sami membership in the WCIP in 1975. WCIP, World Council of Indigenous Peoples, which is now finished, but still was working hard globally to promote indigenous rights and to unite indigenous peoples around the world. Then I would like to also underline the Sami conference 1992, which was held in Helsinki. And there, this Sami National Day and Sami National Song were adopted. So that, as you see, this symbolic signs of the Sami, they have been adopted quite late in the 90s. And then, of course, when we are talking about the self-determination and cultural autonomy, it's important to mention Sami Parliament. The first Sami Parliament was established in Norway 1989, in Sweden 1993, and in Finland 1996. And I suppose you all remember that 1993, it was this International Indigenous Year. And I would like to go to more the role of Sámi women as from Zapatist area. The delegation is consisted of women mostly, so that first I'd like to say that Sámi society has been traditionally matriarchal society, and women's role, and I can mention that Ahku's role, grandmother's role, was very powerful in that society. So there was a kind of equality between men and women, although they have a different division over work. Men were doing the hard work and women mostly working at home and with children. But in the modern time, then everything has changed, as we know, so that although Sámi women have always been very active in politics, and even one Sámi woman, Elsa Laula, started this Sámi movement and this cooperation of the Sámi in different countries, even in the beginning of the 90s. So, but later on, yes, if we think Elsa Laula's first action, this Nordic, she was organizing Sámi first Nordic conference, but after that it took a long time until the women became very active, and it happened mostly in the 1970s and 80s. And one of the reasons for women to join politics was their concern about the transmission of cultural heritage to the coming generations. And that time, women were especially interested in soft rights, tiipmapoikavuotat, in contrast to so-called hard rights, kaarapoikavuotat, as they were called to that time. And these hard rights, they included only the economy, the means of traditional livelihood, land and water right. And since that time, the most important thing for the Sámi was to restore and take back and revitalize their languages, which are several in different countries. And it was so late as in 1986, the first Sámi Women's Commission of the Sámi Council was founded. The Sámi Council, it can be said it is one of the most, it is one of those first indigenous organizations, and it's Nordic or it's international. And they were sitting Sámi representing different Sámi from different countries. And yes, so the first Sámi Women's Commission of the Sámi Council came as late as 1986. And then Sarakka, it is the Sámi Women's Organization, 1988, and Sámi Nation Forum, Sámi Women's Forum, 1993. So these Sámi women have been very active and working to make, as I said in the early too, that to make this Sámi society functioning more equal and to share knowledge with all people and to unite Sámi, not only Sámi women, but also men together. And then in the end, I would like to share with you some experiences during different times of my political career. So the first is I will tell about this, what happened in Utsjoki, 1970s, 80s, then Helsinki, about the Helsinki Sámi conference, and then about this WCIP Indigenous Women's Conference held 1993. So that as Helga already told you about these areas in Finland, so Utsjoki is the northernmost municipality in Finland. That time, the Sámi were still majority in the municipality, which is not nowadays anymore. And the Sámi High School was also founded in 1970s. And there was just built a new schoolhouse where the activities from kindergarten until high school were situated. To Utsjoki, I came from Oslo, where I was studying Sámi at the university. I hadn't actually studied my mother tongue during my school and university time at all. And that time, very many Sámi teachers came to Utsjoki. And in my thinking, these teachers, we were ahead of our time because we started reconstructing the curriculum, for example, so that Sámi language and culture as a subject could be included in the curriculum. The Sámi language wasn't legalized yet, and in the Finnish school law, there was no much about the Sámi schooling or education. And even that time, Sámi were called laps, which is an old name, or it is an exonym given by the outsiders to the Sámi. As we know, Sámi, it comes from the Sámi language, Sápmi, Sámi, kiela, Sápmilas, it is a Sámi word. So that we Sámi teachers, mostly, or most of them were women, we started teaching in Sámi without any permission from the authorities. So it was not until 1983 a lap term was changed into Sámi in the school laws. And then in Helsinki, Sámi conference was very remarkable, since Russian Sámi became official members of the Sámi Council. And it meant uniting the Sámi in 4 countries, and it strengthened extremely collective Sámi identity. And I was elected as a member of Sámi Council in 1986. That was a year when the Women's Commission was founded as well. In 1992, I functioned as a leader of Sámi Council. In the beginning, we women members of the Sámi Council decided to work together and support each other's proposals as far as possible. That made possible to us to get more information and more participation in politics at all levels. It's necessary that women are leaders, since women have considerable knowledge about local histories, land management practices, and language. In my experiences, female members and especially leaders often have to cope alone when faced with difficult situations, often without almost any political or any other support. It is often the case that female leaders are often left alone when contradictions become increasingly demanding. So that in these situations, as we also talk about in our article, resiliency and creativity are needed. During their political and private lives, female leaders must learn to act fairly, both with respect to collective and individual integrities, including their own. In Helsinki Sámi conference, I many times felt I was left alone. I had some trusted workers as one woman working with press. With her help, we managed to inform the Finnish media about the conference. We organized a conference press room where every day we introduced our aims and current issues of Sámi politics and the decisions made in the conference. Thus, the Finnish broadcasting company reported on our decisions and the main objectives of the Sámi politics. That time, the main objective was to reach positive discrimination. That means that the Sámi reached the same level as majority and equal justice as well as self-determination on Sámi own issues regarding linguistic and cultural issues. So that it was the first time that actually the Sámi political aims and issues were very well reported in the Finnish TV news broadcasting. Yes. As a Sámi Council member, I had a chance to actively involve in international indigenous movement and its activities, and in particular, several meetings with other indigenous women had been the most empowering and emancipating. Worldwide, women's struggle for gender equality and thus gradually improved women's status have also empowered Sámi female leaders and Sámi women and opened venues to participate. So that I have taken much of time, but I will still say that in the end that about some concepts concerning indigenous women. In the indigenous context, sitkäivuutta, resiliency, and hutkäivuutta, creativity, are values with which indigenous people have managed and survived in the processes of colonization, assimilation, and discrimination. The concept and the term resilience usually refers to the capacity to recover from or adapt to difficulties. Resilience is a characteristic of Sámi women's value and the ability to perform her leadership actions. Hutkäivuutta, creativity, is also women's ability to perform their political actions. And it's closely related to success and management. So that Sámi spirit is, if I just conclude the what I was talking about, and especially the history of this Sápmi nation building. Sápmi spirit is liberating because it awakes creativity, launches new actions, and opens connections between the past and the present. Thank you so much for listening to me. I hope not to talk too long. Kiitosat.
Wonderful. Thank you ever so much, Irja, for that very, very interesting presentation and giving us a little bit of historical overview. So the next speaker that we are going to be having today is Eija. So I would like to now turn the floor over to Eija.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Sofia. Good afternoon, everyone. Buenas, päivi, hyvää iltapäivää. Muy buenas tardes, hermanas, compañeras. My name is Eija Ranta. I am an Academy of Finland researcher in global development studies, where I study development, politics, and power, particularly in Latin American contexts. I'm sorry that I don't have a PowerPoint, but maybe Erwin can advise me if I'm going too fast. Si Erwin me avisa si estoy yendo demasiado rápido. What motivates my work as development scholar is the search for globally just and sustainable futures, future alternatives that are future alternatives to currently very hegemonic neoliberal globalization, autocratization that is spreading worldwide, and growth agendas that are so prevailing in our ways of conceptualizing how we should organize modern societies. In terms of my own positionality, in today's session, I am looking at the issues of self-determination, autonomy, and conviviality from the perspective of being a Finnish development researcher interested in understanding and also in transforming global inequalities and injustices caused in intricate ways by long-term processes of colonialism and capitalism, as well as patriarchy, which is deeply enshrined in other global phenomena. What I will bring up about the good practices and challenges of community building and conviviality draws on my own years in Latin America, where I have spent lots of time, years in such countries as Bolivia, Nicaragua, Cuba, and I have also once had a marvelous opportunity to visit, albeit briefly, the wonderful Jovel or San Cristobal de las Casas in Chiapas. Zapatistas struggle against the North American Free Trade Agreement, against the Mexican state-led indigenismo, and against multiple forms of imperialism, neocolonialism, and coloniality, has been an amazing inspiration for indigenous movements worldwide, but also for us progressive scholars and activists. Particularly the Zapatista politics of autonomy or autogobierno as decolonizing and non-state popular power has been inspirational. Where I have followed personally struggles for indigenous self-determination, the most is in Bolivia, and I will therefore share some experiences about that. In 2005, there was a major popular and indigenous uprising in Bolivia, through which Aymara Union leader Evo Morales became Bolivia's first indigenous president. And that started a process of decolonizing the Republican state and instead constructing the plurinational state of Bolivia, which in principle meant the recognition of indigenous nations and the establishment of indigenous autonomies that together would formulate the conglomeration of the plurinational state. In fact, there was an attempt to transform the state policies and legislation through indigenous people's notions of good life and well-being, that is vivir bien in Spanish, sumak causa in Quechua, sumak kamania in Aymara, or buen vivir, as the similar process is known in Ecuador. And in 2006, I started a doctoral dissertation trying to observe and follow how these discourses started to spread within state bureaucracy and how there was an attempt to change state and decolonize the state through these conceptualizations and indigenous epistemologies. All in all, the essence of the notion of vivir bien as indigenous good life and indigenous well-being was indisputably indigenous self-determination. But there was, with time, there emerged a clear, I don't know if I would call it confrontation, between two diverse issues. One was strengthening the state sovereignty vis-a-vis imperialist global forces, and another was indigenous autonomies and indigenous self-determination. And those two levels of state and indigenous nations, that relationship has been very tenuous, despite the fact that the government is often portrayed outside of Bolivian borders as an indigenous state. What these discourses of vivir bien meant for indigenous scholars such as Simón Yampara, Mario Torres, and others who theorized it was that it was portrayed as an harmonious paradigm of life, bringing lands, territories, reciprocal social relations, and spiritual aspects into a unity, as opposed to what many indigenous authors called the Western matrix of development. What this then meant for gender equality and what these discourses meant from indigenous women's own personal autonomy and self-determination perspective was a bit more difficult to observe. Before my doctoral dissertation, I had lived about a year or a bit more in Bolivia. I had volunteered in an indigenous organization through which I had had an opportunity to live amidst some communities and some Aymara and Quechua communities. And it was very interesting to compare the experiences from community perspective with what was happening inside the state bureaucratic institutions. Currently in Bolivia, for example, there is the Ministry of Depatriarchalization, and more women, including indigenous women, are members of the parliament and active in politics. More specifically, there was an attempt to include the notion of chachawarmi to state gender policy. Chachawarmi comes from Quechua language. It refers to female and male complementarity and gendered nature of the cosmological order, meaning that all physical, social, political, and economic and spiritual entities have female or male characteristics. And the idea of this chachawarmi concept was that women and men are not necessarily vertically structured in a hierarchical way. And indeed, it seemed that many indigenous organizations and indigenous movements were sharing this idea that in indigenous communities, gender relations are complementary, which is often translated as the same as equality. However, there were various, and particularly maybe indigenous male politicians were very much promoting this idea and perceiving feminism as something being brought to indigenous communities by Western colonialism. However, some indigenous feminists emphasized that it would be actually important to demystify the meaning of gender complementarity inside indigenous communities, demystify it as a category of reality, because as a concept, it may hide the multiple and complex everyday conditions of diverse genders and sexualities in distinct communities, and therefore it may unintentionally sometimes naturalize unequal gender relations. Here, before I conclude, I want to bring a very important idea from Sápmi scholar Rauno Kuokkanen, who in her latest book about self-determination makes a really important distinction between discussing self-determination as a concept of international law and international politics related to indigenous autonomies and indigenous self-determination, but also having another aspect and layer of self-determination, which I quote here Rauno Kuokkanen, according to which self-determination also encompasses myriad other relationships, including the land, kinship, spirituality, and others. According to Kuokkanen, self-determination is about a vision and struggle for restructuring relations of domination for a more just present and future for societies and people. And here she talks about self-determination also referring to domination in gender relations, and therefore self-determination from perspective of women is also important because it refers to a right to live in a clean environment and a right to live without violence and so forth. I'm a little bit out of my time already, so I will wrap up very, very quickly. Going back to to Bolivian case, some concerns were also raised in terms of gender equality and Chachawarmi about how non-binary people, how non-binary individuals find themselves an appropriate and safe space within so dualistic gender system. To conclude, although progressive politics in Latin America has emphasized very strongly indigenous self-determination during the last 10, 20 years, I think that currently what we are seeing in many parts of Latin America, including Bolivia, Ecuador, Mexico, other countries, indigenous goals for regaining territorial rights and self-determination are very strongly confronted by conformity to nationalist agendas, state-led nationalist agendas, and request for orthodoxy by authoritarian populist leaders from various sides of political spectrum. There is an unfortunate tendency to co-opt indigenous movements to governing regimes and to silence dissident indigenous activists, instead of promoting indigenous self-determination and possibility for indigenous communities to decide upon their own issues. However, la lucha continúa, right? Global networking, solidarity, finding alternatives, it remains more important than ever, particularly in situations of large-scale extractivism of natural resources and so on. So I think I will leave it here and look forward to discussions later on. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Aya. That was absolutely wonderful and such a nice view on Latin America, and we really appreciate your contribution. So we will now be moving to our final speaker, which is going to be Perio Christina Virtanen. So without further ado, I will turn the floor over to Perio.
Yes, so hello everyone again. It's very nice to continue after these talks about the concept of self-determination. What does it mean in Indigenous understanding, and already extending the talk from Sápmi to Global South. And I'm understanding the invitation to organize this event that our visitors from Mexico, our Indigenous visitors, are very much interested in knowing what kind of research is being carried out at University of Helsinki and how it relates to the relevance in the idea of indigenous communities. Are there possibilities to make research that is really relevant for indigenous communities as well, and for their own community building? So I'm talking here from the perspective of indigenous studies and a researcher who is not indigenous, but is working in Global South. I'm talking about my own research in Brazil, but also referring to the Indigenous Studies program and Indigenous Studies as a discipline, and the kind of research and research methodologies we are trying to teach in this program. And firstly, I would like to share a website. This is a website of our book that was published this year. It's a product of a network of researchers coming from Finland, Sápmi, Norway, and Sweden. And we were really developing new research methodologies for indigenous contexts. And this is open access, so there are many chapters dealing with Sápmi research, but also with global indigenous studies. And especially there are two chapters from non-indigenous researchers' perspective, researchers who are working in Global South, and they are reflecting on the very core values of indigenous research that are relevance, reciprocity, responsibility, and respect. And this is where I'm now drawing from this tradition of doing research. And I'm very grateful that I've been able to do my research almost for 2 decades with 2 Arawakan speaker nations in Brazilian Amazonia, in the Purus River Basin, with Apurina and Manchineri. And my teachers have also come from the Panoan speakers, especially the Hunikuin and Yavanava peoples. And they have invited me to their territories, and together we have been designing different types of community-based projects. The topics of my research have dealt with land-based education, protection of indigenous cultural heritage, or actually what we are talking about is, in other words, we could put it better and say about biocultural heritage, because we cannot really separate other than human actors from these communities where the sociality is produced. There are many other topics I've been working on, such as indigenous politics and indigenous leaderships, indigenous education and indigenous schooling, school histories. And as I said, all this very hard work that indigenous scholars have done in academia, developing different methodological approaches, have been very important for my work. And I just would like to mention the article by Kirkenes and Bernhard, where they talked about 4 different core values in indigenous research. But there are many other important values that might differ depending on the indigenous nation. But these 4 values are definitely very important also in Amazonian societies where I've been working. So first of all, I would like to talk a little bit about the value of respect. And it really relates to what is indigenous science, what is indigenous knowledge. And indigenous scholars Mary Patist and James Youngblood Henderson, among others, they have really noted that indigenous knowledge underlines that things in an ecosystem are always dependent on each other. So humans are dependent on other than human actors, but so are also other than humans in some ways on humans who have domesticated. For instance, in Amazonia, there are long processes of domestication of the different plants, and we can really talk about collectives of humans and other than human actors. Also, as an example, I could say that Manu Lani Aluni Meyer, she has said and shown how in Hawaii, knowledge is always about dialogue with each other and with the land. We cannot separate the land from the knowledge production. And so knowing in indigenous context, and in Amazonia, this is very evident that knowledge is relational. It's always shaped through others, different places, and diverse actors. And indigenous knowledge is then about relations, not about knowing about those relations. It's produced in relations, not only about knowing about those relations. I also would like to mention Gregory Gahete, who has been very important for indigenous studies, a Tewa scholar from North America, and he has emphasized the idea of interdependency and also the reciprocal nature of knowledge making and the experimental process of understanding on the other. Also, Kyle White, he has written about the idea of interdependence, and he has noted that the concept of interdependence includes a sense of identity associated with the environment and a sense of responsibility to care for the environment. So in this context, we can really understand what is self-determination in indigenous context. And in Amazonia, this is very evident that communities are not bounded entities. They are always relational. And it's very important that they can also make their allies, make their affines, make their what we call potential affines in their own terms. And so they can create their own relations as they themselves decide. And in Amazonia, the values of reciprocity, care, relationality, and conviviality have become very evident. And we cannot talk only about the rights of the individuals, for instance, in research. We really have to talk about rights of the communities. And this is at the core of ethical principles in indigenous research. In Amazonia, we can think that the communities have the communal ownership to their lands. By law, they have the communal ownership to their lands, and they are practicing communal land management, but ultimately, in understanding of my research collaborators, it's not humans who own the land, not even communally, because they are non-human actors, other than human actors who are the ultimate owners of the land. These are called master and chief spirits, such as the Awinte in language of Aporina. And in research, they have to be taken very seriously, because researchers have to be very careful how questions are posed. Even if the community would like to, for instance, record their songs, their ritual songs, together with the researcher for the younger generations, it's very important the context where those songs are sung and performed, because they are acting entities. The songs themselves, they can really interfere different types of relations and well-being of the community members. So this is very specific context in which this relational social philosophies have to be understood by researchers, and it takes a long time to really materialize and embody, experimentally learn these relations. And also we talked about women earlier, and women have the specific knowledge of relations with other than human actors, but it's complementary. It's very complementary to the male's knowledge. But I have seen also what is important to understand here, that communities' knowledge are really different kinds, and also different families or extended families. They share different types of knowledges of different places, because knowledge is place-based and land-based. And different extended families, they actually frequent certain sectors of the land. So I was asked to prepare a map of the neighboring areas of, for instance, one reserve, the Tumia Reserve, where this image is from, for the National Indigenous Agency, because the community wanted to extend their lands. And it became very evident that different families had different knowledges, and even their knowledge of place names differed quite a lot. There were like one family line that knew the left side of the lower river and so on. So what is the research role in that kind of context is really to put together these kind of like clusters of knowledge. And this is what I was doing. I was mapping with different families the knowledges, and with that that kind of collaboration, we were able to map the river and its smaller tributaries, and we could show that these different tributaries have actually an Apurina name, and these places have been frequented for a very long time. There are many issues that I would like to touch upon. Well, if we talk about relevance, the value of relevance, I would like to mention the book project, what we have been doing, me together with a Brazilian linguist who has actually created an alphabet for the community. There are only 30% of Apurina who speak their language, and the language has been hardly written. Only American missionaries have created an alphabet, but it doesn't really fit to the needs of the community, especially because some majority's first language is Portuguese. So it was quite an effort to create such an alphabet that it really serves the needs of the community. And yes, we were working according to the needs of the community. But I would like to mention that even if we incorporated loads of different ideas from communities, their aesthetics, their storylines, we had frequent meetings with the community to have this kind of like feedback. There can be many different difficulties that are not always in the hands of a researcher. For instance, a long distance. Even if we wanted all the time update the communities or what is happening in relation to the, for instance, negotiation with the book publisher and so on, the distances in Amazonia are so huge that it's very difficult to communicate with some areas at all. But fortunately, digital technologies such as creating WhatsApp groups and having certain people living in urban areas who are hosting those people who come from the distant villages to cities, we have managed to create our own system of communication. And also there are the state politics that have been really hindering, for instance, the publishing of these school materials that we have been preparing. And okay, I'm not going here to the Apurina and the nation state, Brazilian nation state relations. That is really a huge topic to address. But there are many challenges in community-based research relating, for instance, to the willingness of the nation state, for instance, to contribute to the indigenous education, even if it's guaranteed by the law. The laws are not implemented in indigenous lands. And the other issue I would like to mention, that communities, as I explained, there are extended family lines with different knowledges, but also different family lines might have very different opinions, for instance, how the language should be written. In Apurina society, there are many different groups. There are loads of divisions, and some of the divisions are due to conflicts for many generations. And there are, as I said, lots of variation, and we wanted to take this into account in our books. So we, for instance, with the majority of the groups, we decided that we include all the variations with all different explanations and reference to different locations, explaining where this variation is used. But for instance, one group of the Apurina, they said that we don't want to hear about the other variations. We want that the book only has our way of speaking of the things. So we have been trying to really work with the diversity and work with plurality. And we have tried to find finance for different versions of the books, for instance, so that each river or tributary have their own school materials. So that requires also lots of time, because we have to find new funders for our projects. So I would like to also talk about the challenges and how should researchers deal with this with the diversity within one Indigenous society. The same goes for the Sápmi society. There are 3 different language groups, for instance, and there are people who live in cities and who live in Sápmi. So there are different types of people, different types of economies, and it's sometimes challenging to take all this diversity ethically into account in research. Okay, I think I will stop here, but what is my main point is really that we have to go beyond the Western conventional thinking that is very individualistic. We know that it's a long time since Descartes said that I am because I think, this ego thinking. Whereas many Indigenous nations, they draw from relational ontologies and relational thinking, as for instance in Africa, the Ubuntu philosophy really highlights that I am because we are, and I think we all are what we are because of the others. But we also have to understand that these differences and similarities are very fluid. And it really depends on context. Who are we and where are maybe the others who we are learning? So thank you so much, and looking forward to the discussion. Kiitos ollut. Shipupe.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Perio, for that wonderful presentation and giving us some insight into the work that you have been doing. So we now have time for Q&A. We have about 25 minutes together. A reminder to please keep your microphones muted when not speaking. Questions and comments can be submitted at any time via the chat. And during this time that we are now in the Q&A, you could also ask a question in the chat, or you could use the raise hand function and the facilitator can call on you and you can ask with your voice. And in this case, I am going to be your facilitator for this question and answer session. I want to really encourage our delegation guests if they have any questions or comments they'd like to make. And then I also wanted to check in with the delegation because there have been some questions that have come in via the chat that are specifically to the delegation. So do you want to maybe tackle those first, Erwin, or how would you like us to proceed?
We're going to reply the first question. What is the role of the woman in Zapatista struggle?
Yeah.
¿Sí?
Pues el trabajo o el rol de las mujeres en la organización, pues empieza desde lo local, el trabajo del local o comisariada o promotora de salud, de educación. Es un proceso de preparamiento en todas las diferentes áreas que todas participan ya ahí.
So the role of the women on the Zapatista autonomy can be described as in the local aspect, as the collective work in their own communities, and then in the autonomous municipality level, and as well in the regional, which means the caracoles. So the role of the woman is present in every level and in every aspect. They can be promoters of health, communication, either being members of the Council of the Good Governments.
Pues es eso el trabajo de las mujeres o la participación que ya ya es en todas las áreas de la autonomía y en la preparación militar también, que ahí se están preparando también compañeros.
So the active role of women on the different levels and areas regarding the autonomy and self-determination, it's present, and either in the political military structure, they are present. So we could say that there is no area where the women doesn't participate.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We have a second question also to the delegation. If you'd like, I could read it out in English while you share it with them. Is that okay? All right.
Yes.
So the second question that came in via the chat to the delegation is, Katri would like to know if the Zapatista women prefer to study and rely on traditional healthcare and medicine of Indigenous communities, or is medicine of health centers, medical doctors, and pharmacies more vital for them? And now Erwin is sharing that question with the delegation in Spanish, which, by the way, just to take a moment while he's translating that, I just want to say that we all owe a big debt of gratitude to Erwin for all the translation that he's been doing behind the scenes today. So let's all remember the amazing labor he's been doing to help make the bridge for this event possible.
La compañera mentioned that they have this combination of different areas on the health care system, the autonomous healthcare system, due to the different kinds of illness they suffer. So they have 3 different areas, which can be like birth treatment through to the ancestral and traditional knowledge, herbs healing, which they make their own medicine, and as well, like they call it hueseras. So the people in charge or with this preserving this ancient knowledge for the healing of bones. But in the other hand, in their clinics, they have the systems, like you could say that they can conduct surgery and they can have antibiotics. So they have achieved preserving their ancestral knowledge and implement it in their daily healthcare system, plus the antibiotics and surgery rooms and so forth.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that really interesting answer. Did the delegation have any comment or questions for our presenters?
No, yo también, que fue muy claro lo que dijeron en su forma de presentación y todo lo que han hecho.
So they said that it's very clear and what the panelists has introduced and the experiences they have shared. So at this point, they are very satisfied with these experiences, sharing and exchange. And we would like to have the video for thinking and listening once again, so like it can be shared with their communities. Thank you.
Wonderful, absolutely. This video, I'm glad that you brought that up. For anybody who missed the announcement at the beginning, this is recorded, and we will be sharing the link with all registered participants and also via the Exalt webpage and highlighting it on some of our social media. I see Perio has a hand up.
Yes, but I just saw that there is a Helga's question for all the delegation, so maybe we can take that first. But in continuation, we here would like to ask, what does the delegation think? What was the most important thing you learned in Sápmi during your visit to northern part of this continent? And we would like to also hear from Helga, because you are also a researcher, but here you spoke from maybe different perspectives. So Helga, how do you take these questions into account in your own research? We would like to hear a bit more about that. I mean, maybe we know here, but it would be very helpful for the other audience to hear about that. Thanks.
Maybe we could have Helga answer to that question, and then we can give the delegation a bit of time to reflect on the takeaway. So I think it's okay now for Helga to maybe proceed with an answer, and then we'll do Helga's question from the chat.
Thank you. I would like to focus on the delegation in this remaining time and not so much emphasize my work. Yes, as Perio mentioned, I do research. I research reconciliation, and maybe I can just shortly say that the Zapatistas visiting Europe is challenging many paradigms and many ideas about reconciliation. And I can give an example. I have been highly impressed. It's the letter that the Zapatistas was writing to the collectives in Europe before actually arriving in Europe. And I realized while reading the letter that the Zapatistas are not seeking recognition or reconciliation from the state of Spain for trying to colonize their regions in Mexico. And if I think of the reconciliation field, it's quite unusual not to expect this kind of recognition and official apology. So it's very, very unusual, and it sets and it gives really nice indigenous. It's difficult to explain, but how would I say it? I'm just saying that it's completely unusual in the field of reconciliation research.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that answer. It'll be a now slow transition because we want to make sure to let Erwin finish sharing what you just said with the delegation, and then we'd like to invite the question that Perio asked in short: what does the delegation think of the presentations that we just saw, and what are some of the important takeaways? So Erwin, is there an answer that they'd like to give to that question?
Yes, regarding about the Sápmi encounter, is this the question? Yes, okay. Pregunta que cómo fue para ustedes el encuentro con el pueblo Sápmi.
Y para nosotros es tener esa sensación de que pensábamos que era otro mundo, otra historia, pero nos encontramos como que si estuviéramos en casa, en familia. Hay muchas cosas que tenemos en común como pueblos originarios.
She expressed that the encounter with the Sápmi people or Sápmi nation was wonderful and beautiful, that we never expected that that the distance and like how two different territories, like very far away, if we think geographically, like the southernmost most forgotten the state of Mexico named Chiapas, and in Otseyoka, like the last municipality of Finland, in Sápmi territory, how they can come together, and they found themselves like feeling so uncomfortable that they felt in home. So like they never expect that they will have so much in common and feeling so happy.
What a lovely reflection on that time. Should I ask the next? There was another question that came in. Oh, we have another intervention. Sorry, Erwin.
Yes, and she said that they found very interesting the way of they try or they apply their autonomy. So like they found similarities on building this autonomy. ¿Algo más? We have one more.
Otro de la importancia que vimos ahí, pues es su cultura y su tradición que ellos están promoviendo, que esa cultura o esa tradición de sus ancestros que no lo están olvidando. Una parte, pues ahí vimos de las culturas y tradiciones, y también nos llevamos algo porque nosotros a veces que ya lo estamos olvidando, y ellos nos enseñaron mucho que no se deje olvidar o que no se deje de hacer la tradición y la cultura de nuestros abuelos.
One very important thing that they are mentioned as young women traveling in this delegation is that they understood the importance of these ancestral practices that has kept the livelihoods in the present times, and that they remember this. I mean, the Sámi community remind them that they should preserve this ancient knowledge, and that they will bring this back home. So that for them was very important to understand the importance of this ancient knowledge and practices in the present times.
Wonderful, thank you. Those are two very fine takeaways. So there's another question that is directly for the delegation in the chat. If you'd like, again, Erwin, you can read it out in Spanish right now, and I'll read it in English, and then hopefully the delegation will have an answer for that. The question coming from the chat is actually from Helga, and it is, are the Indigenous women's revolutionary laws actively and systematically applied in the Zapatista courts? If so, how successfully and on what levels? Local, regional? So we'll give Erwin a moment to share that question, and we will see if they have an answer for us on that. And in the meantime, if there's anyone else from the audience that's interested in asking a question, please either type it in the chat or use the raise hand function. After we have about 8 minutes left together, so we'll probably have time for at least one more question after this one.
Pero ya lo estamos practicando, y uno de ellos es que ya estamos en todas las áreas y estamos hasta aquí, y se dieron cuenta que no fue necesario ir entre hombres y mujeres, sino que ya un grupo de mujeres lo está haciendo. Por eso es que lo aplicamos en todo, y desde, como zapatista es lo que nos rige como mujer.
She refers that the revolutionary Zapatista women's law, it's applied in each level. So like the local level at the village or the community, at the autonomous municipalities, and as well in the Council of the Good Governments, in the Caracoles. So in each level it's applied, that they have the right, so to say, to decide in which areas of this autonomous process they want to collaborate. And one of the clear examples is like there is this division, I mean, that is half men and half women representatives on the Council of the Good Government. That means in the regional level. And so the clear example is like they are traveling through Europe and they have been visiting Finland, and it's a delegation just conformed of women. So that they don't need any men to be traveling with, and that they can travel and share these autonomous experiences, or what they named the listening and the word.
All right, thank you very much. And we have what is going to be our final question, because unfortunately we are starting to run a little bit short on time. It's amazing how 2 hours can go so fast, but time flies when you're hearing amazing presentations, right? So there's a question in the chat that is coming from Hector Sanchez, and this once again is directly to the Zapatista delegation. So once again, Erwin, I'll read it out, and if you could please read it in Spanish. So coming from Hector, I would like to ask the Zapatista delegation how differently they see their contribution as women to this revolutionary process of the journey for life in comparison to other delegations that are made up by men. What makes different and unique their revolutionary role as women in this journey? And then I also see from Tandra, I hope that we will have time to get your question. If you want to put it down in the chat if it's a small one, because we have about 5 minutes left together. So we'll give everyone a minute to make that translation. It's so neat that we're able to do this kind of in the 2 languages at the same time. So it looks like Erwin is ready.
Nos organizamos así porque siempre en los encuentros pasados que tuvimos ya internacionales, muchas compañeras nos anduvieron invitando que vayamos a su país, a su lugar, y también encontramos de que hay grupos que son puras feministas. Entonces pensamos así, organizarnos con puras mujeres para asistir en esos encuentros. Pero al igual, hay países que están revueltos los compas y las compas, aunque vengamos aparte, pero hay a veces necesario que tenemos que juntarnos y ir juntos. Y también han pasado, ya nos platicaron que han encontrado ese problema que si va un grupo de compas y es invitado por un grupo de feministas, pero ahí se están dando cuenta de que aunque sea hombre o sea mujer, estamos hablando en una sola causa y en un solo modo. No tenemos división entre hombre y mujer. Y ahorita estamos haciendo por una decisión que en el momento que sea necesario de puras mujeres ya lo está.
So she expresses that due to different women encounters that they have held in their territories, in the caracoles, they have only for women, so there has been a lot of invitations from different feminist groups to visit their territories, and as well like these exchanges of these visions, works, autonomies, and processes between women has led to organize different kinds of groups or delegations conformed by women or men or mixed group regarding to the needs of the different activities. So for if there will host different feminist forums, activities, so like the conformation of the delegations could be only women or men or mixed. So due to all these encounters and requests of visiting their territories and host and held feminist activities, so it's like they have been traveling with them, only women. So and I think their participation, it's very clearly represented all by only women and the vision, but they said like there is no really difference between the confirmation of the delegation by men or women due to they have the same capacities and they can achieve the different purposes that they were given to conduct the journey for life.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that answer. And Tandra, I do apologize. We are out of time together today. I see that you put your question down in the chat, and maybe if you'll send us your email via private message, maybe Erwin can solicit an answer to that after we're together here today. And like I said, I am so sorry. We just are up against the clock. So I really want to say thank you very much. I'm going to quickly spotlight all the speakers that joined us today, including our lovely, did I get them all? Yeah, I think everybody's there, including our delegation, which we are so honored that you came here to join us. And so there's never a good way to end these things, because I feel like we could talk for so much longer, because these are all such important topics that we have touched upon, and it's just a touch, but hopefully this is, as we've said a few times over the course of this encounter together, you know, hopefully this is part of a process that doesn't just end here today, but is going to continue on. So really quick, that's the very last slide. I got all the thank yous on there in all the lovely languages that were represented today. I just really wanted to share that because I was very proud of myself. But anyway, so I don't know if Perio would like to say a little goodbye, or any of the speakers would like to say a quick final word, but we are at our 5 o'clock mark, so.
Yes, my very warm thanks for everyone for being here today, and thank you for our visitors. And I hope we can continue the dialogue later. And I give the word for our eldest associated researcher, our knowledge holder, Irja Seurujärvi-Kari.
Okay, thank you for your invitation to participate in this important discussion here. And it was joyful to see, at least in Zoom, this Zapatist delegation, and to hear something about the Zapatistas movement and revolution, and how they would like to improve their life. Thank you so much, and have a nice visit in Finland.